Okay, this is my lesson on active and passive voice. I actually think it's a pretty easy concept to grasp, but it's much harder to put into practice. You can follow along with the handout I have on both assignments, and here we go. So sentences can be either in the active voice or the passive voice. Okay, active voice is when a subject actually does what the verb describes. Here's an example. Mrs. Schmidt invited John and Sam to the cocktail party. Mrs. Schmidt is actually doing the inviting. So the main verb of the sentence, invited, is being done by the subject of the sentence. Another example, Jane called me. Jane is the one who's actually doing the calling. Okay, now compare that to passive voice. Passive voice is when the verb action is done to the subject. Basically, I'm going to use the same two sentences, but flip them around. Sam was invited to the cocktail party by Mrs. Schmidt. Sam is the subject of the sentence. Is Sam doing the inviting? No, Sam was invited. The verb was done to Sam by Mrs. Schmidt. Is that the name? Mrs. Schmidt. The other example, I was called by Jane. Was I doing the calling? No, Jane was. So again, notice that these sentences communicate the same message. But here's the problem with passive voice. In the passive examples, the thing doing the action is hidden or obscured, and that makes it harder to understand for the reader. It's not the way our brains work when we're processing information. So you need to try to write it with the reader in mind. Now, I have a theory of why we write in passive voice. I think that what happens is as we're writing, we're trying to figure out what we're saying. And so it's natural for our brain to throw in some pauses as it tries to figure out what the ideas are. So in your rough drafts, you're going to see lots of passive voice as you're trying to figure out what you're saying. So the first draft is for you, but the second draft is for the reader. And so in the second draft, you need to make sure that you have the subject doing the actions. Okay? All right, so how do you find passive voice? Passive voice, for our purposes here, we could get more complicated with it, but for our purposes here, only rule you need to know is passive voice will always use some form of the to be verb. Here are the conjugations of to be verb. Things like I am, you are, he, she is, has been, those kinds of things. Basically, you can do a command search, a command F search in your paper and see if you have one of these verbs. If this verb is helping another verb, chances are you have the passive voice. So for example, going back to the previous page, let's see, I was called by Jane. Was is helping the verb called, was called. Another way to figure out if you have passive voice or not is to ask yourself the question, who or what in the sentence is actually doing the verb? And is that thing the subject of the sentence? So here's the example. Sam was invited to the cocktail party by Mrs. Schmidt. Who's actually doing the verb? Well, what is the verb? The main action is inviting. And who is doing it? Is it Sam? No, it's Mrs. Schmidt. I was called by Jane. The main action is called. Who or what is doing the call? I was called. So it wasn't I, it was Jane. Okay? Now, how do you fix the passive voice? Because it's relatively easy to find. It's much harder to fix. So, easy way to put it, make the thing that does the verb also the subject. So for example, I was called by Jane. Jane did the calling, so how can we rewrite the sentence so Jane is the subject? Jane called me. Another example, Scott was humiliated. Did Scott humiliated? No, actually, here's what's tricky about this. Something humiliated Scott, and by the way, pay attention to this. This is what the real problem is with the passive voice. This is where it gets the most tricky, okay? Pay attention. Put down your phone, look at this for a second. Scott was humiliated, but This sentence doesn't make it clear at all who or what did the humiliating. So I'm reading this, Scott was humiliated, and there's a whole lot of information that I don't have. Who or what humiliated Scott? Got it? So the writer of this sentence needs to think, wait, what am I actually trying to say here? Scott was humiliated, but like, what is actually doing the humiliating? And so after a lot of soul searching, the writer of this sentence came to the conclusion that the ghost of Christmas past humiliated Scott. Okay, so in your own sentences, if you have something like this, if there's no subject doing the verb, you need to figure out what that subject is, like I did right here. Scott was humiliated by whom or by what? Or the birds were hunted by who or by what? By the hawk, okay? Let's do some examples together. This one will be easy. The shrimp were fed to the astronauts by the Dallas Cowboys. What's the main action of the sentence? Fed. Okay. Who or what is doing the feeding? Are the shrimp feeding? No, the shrimp are being fed. Okay. The Dallas Cowboys are doing the feeding. So you would say the Dallas Cowboys fed the shrimp, that's horrible spelling, to the astronauts. Make sense? Let's try another one. The desert is haunted by librarians. How would you fix this one? Yes, good. You would say the librarians haunt the desert. The main action, of course, is haunt. Who or what is doing the haunting? The librarians. Okay, I am shocked by your behavior. Who's shocked here? Who's doing the shocking? You might think, well, I am, because I'm the one who is shocked. Oh, but hold on, you said who is shocked, right? So, I am shocked. That's a problem. What or who is doing the shocking? Your behavior is. Your behavior shocks me. Okay, now it's going to get tricky. After dinner, a tub of frosting was devoured. How do you fix this one? Okay, what is the main verb? Devoured, I guess. Let's see, what was devoured? Frosting. Let's see, who or what did the devouring? Let's see, did dinner do the devouring? No. Did the tub do the devouring? No, because it doesn't say itself. So we actually don't know who or what is doing the devouring. So the writer needs to stop and figure that out. Wait, who or what did the devouring? Turns out it was my mom. My mom devoured a tub of frosting after dinner. Or you could say after dinner, my mom devoured a tub of frosting. There's different ways to do it. But the idea is you need to figure out who or what is doing the verb of the sentence. And a lot of your sentences, when you have this problem, there's going to be a huge question mark. I think this might be the last one. The camera was installed yesterday. Okay, main verb is installed. So the camera was installed yesterday. Wait, who's doing the action? Is it camera? No. Are there any other nouns in here? Oh, here's another noun. Is it yesterday? Let's try it. Yesterday installed the camera. No, because yesterday isn't a person. So again, big question mark. Who or what did the installing? I don't know. The giraffe installed the camera yesterday. The hardest part of this is going to be figuring out or recognizing the fact that you don't know who or what is doing the verb. This is the biggest problem I see when students try to rewrite it. They don't even know, they don't even recognize this huge question mark. They don't even see that they don't know who's doing the action. So for example, a sentence might say something like, I was excited. Well, hold on a second. Who or what is doing the exciting? Are you doing the exciting? No, you are excited by something, right? The test excited me. I was scared. Wait, who's doing the scaring? Are you doing the scaring? I was scared. No, if you're doing the scaring, you'd be scaring someone else, right? I was scared. I was scared of my mom, right? So a lot of times you'll think that was scared, like, well, no, I'm doing the scaring, but you won't see there's a big question mark there. So pay attention to that. Okay, I'm going to see if this video is any good. So we're going to call it.